Good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Rulon, and I will be your presenter tonight. I'm excited to be with you tonight, and I always like to start promptly. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a CPA in Glendale, Arizona, who's also a financial advisor and an insurance advisor. I've been in the business for about 32 years now and have a great office at 59th in Union Hills, and I'm excited to be with you tonight. So let's get started. Every once in a while, we're going to make a short little pit stop so you can get my name and information and phone number and email. But other than that, we have a great program for you tonight, and I'm looking forward to presenting it. So obviously, my name is Scott Rulon. I've been married for 25 years. I'm a father of a college junior at GCU, and we're very excited next week. Our son is coming home from college, so first time we've really got to see him since September. So that's exciting, and I bet many of you are excited, or maybe some of you have some trepidation about Thanksgiving coming next week, but who thought Thanksgiving would get here as fast as it did? And we'll be excited with the news of maybe a couple of coronavirus vaccines that in the not too distant future, we're not going to have to wear these things anymore. So that's going to be pretty exciting. So as we move forward, what I want to talk about tonight is how to build a retirement recovery plan that protects your money from a crisis. In other words, how do I get to retirement and go through it without going broke? That is probably the most important thing that we can do. And I'm going to give you some good ideas tonight. So it's some different perspectives. Some of you may know some of this stuff, some of you may not. But certainly we're going to give you a fire hose worth of information, and hopefully you learn something. So the goal of this presentation is to show you the only way to have a successful retirement and the 5 critical steps you must do to protect it. So obviously the information that's presented here is presented by a licensed professional, and it's not specific to any one person's circumstances. So we should see this as an educational opportunity. I do have a greater knowledge of tax in some sense since I'm a CPA and we have a CPA practice as well. So if you ever have any questions about that, certainly happy to answer those. We do this day in and day out and have done so for about 32 years now. So let's get started. Why am I passionate about income planning? Well, income planning is one of those places that affects every area of our life. And some of you may not realize that today, if you are a married couple, you know, one of you has the chance, at least a 25, sometimes even close to 50% chance of living well into your 90s. In fact, my mother's that way. She just had her 91st birthday about a month ago, and she's still doing well. So some of you may experience that as well. So that's pretty exciting. But remember back when you may lived in an apartment, or you may have gone to college or high school and they had that bulletin board and there was all the options there about, we had options about roommates, we had options to go to this party. There may be things that we could do to get work, but there was a myriad of options. But the confusing thing is there were so many options and we didn't know what to do with them all. That's what we're going to do tonight. So some of you may have seen this character here. If you may or may not recall, him out around March 24th of this year, that's the day that the stock market tanked. And so this is a rather iconic picture of, this is a trader down on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. If you've never been there, certainly an interesting experience to go there. But can you see the pressure and the angst on his face? This kind of event doesn't happen very often, but it happens every so often. And in fact, on this very day, guess how much stocks dropped? In case you didn't know, it was about 30%. So if you look at kind of that graph of what happened to the market, you can see this great big valley before the market came roaring back after that. So let's talk about the traditional retirement income model. So many of you may recall talking to your parents and your grandparents and stuff like that, or the generation before. And this was the traditional retirement income model that they used. So they had a base level of protected income. The important thing, because many of them got pensions, is the majority of risk was on the employer that they worked for, whether that be the government or a large corporation. Then they had Social Security on top of that. And on top of that, if they wanted some extras, certainly they had some savings where they put some assets or maybe some CDs and got a little bit of extra return so they could do things like vacations or buy new cars. As an example, I remember my grandfather, who grew up in Kansas, he always worked 2 jobs. So he had his first job to support the family, and he had a family of 5, and my father was the second oldest. And my grandfather always had a second job because he loved Chryslers. So he always went out and bought a brand new blue Chrysler about every other year with earnings from a second job. Unfortunately, today, things have changed quite substantially. There's really only about 4% of the population that has a pension. And the rest of us, we have to save on our own. So it'd be really fair to say that the retirement income model today has been shattered. And so today, most of you know about this thing called a 401k. If you work for a city, you have a 457. If you're a teacher, you might have a 403b. But all those 40-something plans are just basically part of the tax code. They were special provisions for deferred compensation that helped you save. And what's happened today is, guess what? The majority of the risk is on you. If you're one of those lucky people that works for perhaps state, city, or some other county or local government, some of you still have pensions. So certainly firefighters, teachers, people on the police force, you still have those, but you're only 4% of the population today. Certainly in that middle tier, we still have Social Security, and some of you will choose to apply for that at an earlier age. Some will choose to apply later. But guess what? Most of the risk today is on you. And that's the thing that we really have to worry about. When is the right place to start saving for retirement? If you haven't started, well, it's time to start today. And so here's one of the interesting things. I don't know how many of you are members of kind of AARP, but they had some interesting articles in there this month about how to reset your finances. And they also had some interesting articles about Social Security. So I'll share that with you a little bit later, but that'll bring you real current on what's happening with Social Security and how COVID's affected that. So certainly very timely for what we're looking at today. So many of us, you obviously see these televisions or computer screens. These days, we suffer from lack of too much information, maybe not. And so that gets crazy. So everybody is trying to pull us in a different direction. And so some people want you to do this and some want you to do that. In fact, I want to show you a fairly famous commercial. This actually happened to do with ING. It was a marketing campaign. And so everybody was walking around there with their number. So this was the number that you needed so that you could retire. And so you notice in this case, you see the younger guy carrying a much big number, and the older guy is looking over his shoulder saying, well, maybe I don't get quite as much. But it got a little bit crazy because really it's not always about the number. What is it really about? Well, you're right, it's about the income. So how many of you have seen this man? This man's name is Dave Ramsey, in case you haven't heard of him. He's got a radio show. Sometimes he's on television. One of his gags always used to be is having a great big pair of scissors and cutting credit cards in half. And so Dave Ramsey would give you certain advice, and that advice didn't always agree with somebody else. Some of you know this character. You got it. His name's Kramer. He had like that bullhorn, and he had all these beepers and gadgets and stuff like that. He'd say, buy this stock, don't buy that stock. But he would give you very different advice than what Dave Ramsey would. But who's right? Well, but here's the real fact. It's not about whether one of them is right or wrong. The truth of the matter is, if we look at some of these headlines, Bloomberg as example, retirees might run out of money 10 years before they die. Americans do not have enough retirement savings. Really? America has the widest retirement gap of developed nations, and it's only going to get worse. So certainly those are some scary things, but these are ripped from some very recent headlines. And so we get bombarded with this stuff every day. And so we're wondering, what do we need to do? And so as we look at retirement, there's certain risks that are involved in that. And I'm going to kind of give you the 4 major risks. Certainly you see the other one, laws can change, withdrawal rates can change, we can die, there can be deflation, there can be sequence of returns. But the 4 major risks that we will deal with is longevity. Well, longevity is, do I run out of money before I run out of life? None of us certainly want that. And knowing that one of us, if we're a married filing joint couple, may live well into our 90s, we actually have the opportunity today of perhaps living as long as in retirement as we live during our working lives. Certainly every night we hear the stock market, who knows what the Dow Jones is today. So the Dow Jones really only represents 30 stocks. So the Dow Jones Industrial doesn't really represent a significant portion of the market, but sometimes it's a good market indicator of the stocks going up and stocks going down. So also we have to be concerned with things like long-term care. What happens when I can no longer take care of myself? What do I do? Will a family member step in? Will I need to go to a retirement home? When I need to call somebody in so they can help take care of things because my spouse is a little tired. The other things we don't realize is certainly income taxes. And although we certainly don't know exactly the results of the election, if one party gets elected, we may see more income tax. If the other one got elected, then maybe taxes will stay the same. And the last thing is inflation. So when I was growing up in college at the University of Texas, we used to talk about this thing called purchasing power parity. That absolutely had to do with a dollar is worth more today than it is in the future. So the same dollar can't buy the same thing. And so in this particular article in AARP, what it said is, so if you were spending $100 in New York City, you'd only get value for like 70. And yet those same $100 in a state like New Mexico might actually buy you $115 worth of goods. So even inflation is not in the same in different states and different cities in the United States. So that's some important things that we certainly want to think about. So definitely those are looming on horizon. But what I think, and I think what many think, and this is very important, that the only way for a successful retirement is through an income plan that protects your money from the 4 key risks that we just talked about. So having a great deal of money in the bank or the stock market is one thing, but what do we have to do to that? You're right, we have to convert it to income. So this is a huge paradigm shift. We need to learn how to spend our retirement income successfully so it won't run out. And that's a bit of what we're going to talk about tonight. So what we're going to call this is the retirement income framework. These are 5 critical steps. Think of it as like the GPS in your phone or Google Maps, and we need a path to lead us towards a successful retirement. So it doesn't matter what the economy is, who our politicians are in office. We should be able to spend our money comfortably without having to worry too much about the future. So let's spend confidently regardless of the economy. And so some of you may have grandchildren, want to take care of those grandchildren, or perhaps you want to contribute some money towards their college. That other building there, in case many of you haven't been to Italy, that's the Vatican. So that's where Pope Francis is, as an example. Or the camera certainly represents hobbies. So when you have a little bit more time on your hand, maybe you want to do something like photography, or you want to do hiking, or maybe you just want to have a quiet dinner on the beach with your spouse or your significant other and just enjoy a little bit of life. All of those are important. So as we talk about the retirement income framework, It's a 5-step proprietary process that creates an income plan focused on protecting your money from those 4 key risks. So let's talk about those. Let's identify, which means let's get a grade card on our current financial status. Let's talk about protection. How do we protect that money so it doesn't go away? How do we reduce our income taxes? How do we invest our assets? And most important of all, since plans change, how do we look at what we do when times change? We may have different objectives each year, so very important to do an annual review. So certainly my wife Lisa and I, we sit down to do this on a regular basis. So we don't meet just once a year, but we actually probably meet about every 3 months, because priorities can change. Parents can get older, our kids may have to go to college. So we need to be very careful with the way that we handle our money. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what's called identify. Any of you recognize this drawer? I certainly do. So right when you walk into our kitchen at home and turn to the left, if you were to open that drawer, we have a drawer that certainly looks something like this. And so certainly there's lots of useful items in there. I can see a pair of sunglasses, some playing cards, maybe that's some Mucinex if you get a cold or fever or something like that. We've got a stapler, but you know what I'm talking about. We all have this kind of drawer, and each one of these objects inside of that drawer definitely is useful, but it's only useful if it's organized. Likewise, you know it, most of us have a financial junk drawer as well. We may have that stack of papers that we have in an accordion file. We maybe have it in a file cabinet or a safe, but it looks something like this. We've got our Social Security, we've got our life insurance, we've got our IRAs, our savings, and our 401ks. But many of us need to learn how to organize that and make it better. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. How do we organize that? So many of you have never heard of Robert C. Merton, but this is an article really about 6 years ago about the crisis in retirement planning. Mr. Merton, who's a Nobel laureate, said, "Our approach to savings is all wrong. We need to think about monthly income and not net worth." And so we want to be very careful with how we convert that net worth into income, because that's the key. We can't spend our net worth, but we can certainly spend our income. So here's the key line from that. Our approach to savings is all wrong. We need to think about monthly income, not net worth. So we're going to take one of those pit stops right now. And so here's my name, my phone number, and my email in case any of you have to leave early. So let's take a look and let's head forward. So remember that old argument between needs and wants? This is what I need. But like at the grocery store, one of your children, if you had one, they say, "Oh, I want that candy bar." So certainly those are two different things. So what do I need? Certainly I need the lettuce and the milk, but I don't necessarily need the candy bar. So what do I need in my retirement income to do? What do I want my retirement income to do? So that is the essentials is the needs, and the discretionary is the wants. So we're going to create a hypothetical person here. And I know not everybody's in this place. Some of you spend a bit more, some of you spend a bit less, but for purposes of illustration, as we illustrate this couple or this person, they've added up all of their regular monthly expenses and they amount to about $5,000 per month. And certainly they have discretionary expenses of about $2,000 per month. So what we're going to call this $5,000 per month is my protected income number. So as we head forward, we certainly looked at identify, and now we're going to look at a little bit about protect. And let me show you a recent article from Time Magazine. Time said securing at least a base level of lifetime income should be every retiree's priority, at least if they want to live happily ever after. So while I agree that money is not the root of all happiness, I will say that those that can pay their bills and have some extra money for some of the fun stuff, you tend to live a little bit happier lives than others, because who always wants to be worrying about expenses? I think we need to worry about how we're going to pay our bills, and if we know that it's coming in every month, I think we feel much more calm with the way things are. Any of you recognize this place? In case you don't, I've actually driven through here, and this was a recent trip to a place called Death Valley. For those of you that might or might know, Death Valley is one of the lowest and the hottest places in the world. And so as a recent trip, as we were driving through Death Valley, we happened to look down at the gas, and we were down to about a quarter of a tank. And so, the rest of us, we started worrying about where we were going to get gas. And so we saw that road sign, and that road sign said 100 miles to the next gas station. And so everybody in the car started giving us ideas of how we could get the next 100 miles. The first guy said, let's speed up really quick so we can coast down the rest of the way to Death Valley. And the other lady in the back, she said, oh, no, we need to slow down. We need to slow down so we'll have enough gas to get there. But the point is, what do we do when we're starting to run out of gas? So we can certainly think of that like our retirement. We want our retirement, once it gets to that quarter tank of gas, that quarter of a tank never runs out. And so that's what we're looking for. And so as we think about the average length of retirement, I want to show you some real calculations, and these all come from the Social Security Administration. If you're a single male, you can expect to live to about age 83. If you're a female, you ladies can expect to live a bit longer, to at least age 85. And in fact, a couple that's 65 years old living together, you can expect actually to live an extra 24 years. So you'll live even longer because you spend time taking care of each other. So as you can see, we can live as long in retirement as we lived in our working lives. So it's really important to take care of that. So many of you will want to know, what exactly is protected income? So let's give you a definition. Protected income is guaranteed for life. It's backed by a government or financial institution. It increases over time without inflation, and it increases each year you choose not to start income. So certainly we've talked briefly about pensions, so we're not going to talk that much about that tonight. It just kind of goes to say, for pensions, only about 4% of us have that. So not many of us can count on that. So we're going to concentrate a little bit more on Social Security and annuities. So let's start with Social Security. So Social Security is a monthly benefit. Some of us can choose to start it at age 62, and other of us can start it at age 70. But there's an amount in the center there. It says FRA. What that means is that's my full retirement account. That's when I get the amount that they're going to give me when I reach that maximum age. So I want to read you just a couple lines from a recent AARP article that kind of gives us a little bit of information about that. One of the questions that they asked is, will Congress radically cut benefits? Well, AARP said not anytime soon. There's no question, though, that Social Security will need to be addressed, not because of the coronavirus, but because of the demographic virus wrought by aging boomers. When changes inevitably come to Social Security, that might involve reduced future benefits. They will likely be phased in over a long period of time. Just like the last major reduction that occurred in 1983, that's when Congress raised the retirement age from 65 to 67. And they won't fully implement that until 2027, more than 40 years later. So just kind of an interesting perspective in the latest AARP that I found this morning. And so definitely, if you don't have a copy, kind of good. There's some great articles on how to reset your finances. That's a little bit about what we're talking about tonight, but let's go ahead and move forward now. So there we can see full retirement age 66. And for those that are willing to wait, you can certainly increase your retirement in terms of Social Security by 8% a year. And if you're willing to wait till age 70, you'll get quite a bit more. So that's the difference between receiving $2,000 a month and $2,640 in this example. And here's the interesting thing. Social Security certainly allows every once in a while these cost of living adjustments. So they'll actually increase your benefit to offset the rising cost of inflation. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't happen every year, but only when the government deems it necessary. So not the greatest of situations, but it's certainly something to offset the rising cost of goods. The other thing that I've often seen is, so maybe that COLA adjustment came in, but what happened on the other end? You're right, the Medicare went up. So sometimes instead of a greater, you got a lesser. So here's the difference between claiming it at perhaps age 62, age 66, or age 70. So if we look at the gray area there, that's if we started getting our Social Security retirement benefit at 62. The middle part is if we got it at full retirement age, that good old FRA. The last one is if we waited till age 70. So you notice there's quite a bit of a money difference there between the few. Now, not everybody, I get it, is going to take it at age 70. Not everybody's going to take it at age 62. Some of you may take it at a different age. But the important thing to know is the longer you wait, the bigger the benefit gets. So for some of you, probably once a year, you get your Social Security statement. So whether you're actually receiving Social Security today, or you're just getting a statement of where your benefits might be, there's a key line there in the center that I want everybody to focus on. Social Security benefits are not intended to be your only source of income when you retire. On average, Social Security will replace about 40% of your pre-retirement earnings. You will need other savings, investments, pensions, or retirement accounts to live comfortably when you retire. So none of us should expect that Social Security will cover all of our expenses. So that brings up the notion, well, what do we need to do? So that leads me to the last and final source for protected income, which is an annuity. For those of you that don't know what an annuity is, let me give you a pretty simple definition. Annuity is basically a savings account at an insurance company rather than a savings account at a bank. And so at its lowest level definition, that's what it is. But we're going to jazz that up and let you know that really an annuity is a personal Social Security-like stream of income from a top-rated insurance company. So many annuities have the ability to do annual or monthly withdrawals. And for those of you that are willing to wait a little bit longer, just like with Social Security, many of them can give you maybe a 5 or 6% increase. Some can be more than that if they're indexed up. But the important thing to hear is if you are able to wait a little bit longer, perhaps work a little while longer, your benefits can certainly increase the longer you're willing to wait. Many annuities actually offer inflation protection. So if an index goes up there, they give you some extra money. And so these are not like when Congress deems we should get more. It really has to do with an index going up. And if it goes up, we certainly get more. So there's lots of good and bad about annuities. And so certainly we hear people like Jane Bryant Quinn, who absolutely hates annuities. And you have Dave Ramsey, and he doesn't seem to like them too much. And, some of their criticisms could be well founded in the fact that they do have some limited liquidity. They might have surrender charges like a CD if we take them out earlier, and some of them might have fees. But on the other side of the equation, let's not forget that the great thing about annuities is they offer principal protection. They can guarantee income for life. So even when the major value inside of the annuity runs out, the insurance company is obligated to keep paying you for your lifetime. That's right, your lifetime. And they do carry inflation protection. So I think these generally outweigh the liquidities, the surrender charges, and the fees. In fact, you know that there's a lot of annuities here. There's some that don't have surrender charges, and there's some that have very low or almost no fees. So some of the criticisms may be a little bit unfounded. So as we go forward, we've talked about identify. We've talked about protect in the sense that we have Social Security and annuities and those lucky people that have a pension. But let's talk about reduce. Well, as you know, we're getting close to the end of the year, so we're not that far away from that good old time called income taxes again. And so what many of you don't realize is that when you hit retirement, one of your largest bills could actually be your income tax. So I want to give you kind of a scenario here. Let's pretend that we're sitting down with a banker and we're going to get a loan. Okay, so we're sitting with the banker, and what do you always ask when you get a loan? You're right. We ask for our payment terms and how long we're going to have to pay them back. So I want you to think about this in a slightly different fashion. So let's pretend like this is our taxes. So our taxes, when different presidential administrations change, they change the tax codes. And so what if that banker told you, well, I'm not sure when I'm going to have to pay it back, so I'll just give you a call when I'm ready for my money. And the other thing is, income tax rates can go up. So the more you make, the more you pay. That's called the progressive system, and that's the way they do it. Would any of you in your right mind accept a loan that there are no payment terms and you never knew what the rate was going to be? I think not. So let me give you an idea of where marginal tax rates have been since the 1913. So you can see that they've been all over the board. And so the truth is the average rate in the high income tax bracket's been 57.3%. Now that's pretty high. So we certainly never know when taxes will be up, when they'll be down, but we certainly know that they'll change. In fact, did you know after World War II, the highest rate was 94%? That's just crazy. So as we move towards retirement, and so many of us may have our house paid off, we'll lose that thing called a mortgage interest deduction. Many of us have our children will grow up, and my son just turned 21, so he's pretty much out of the house. So guess what we lost? We no longer have those child exemptions or child tax credits, so those go away. And many of us through our working life, we've given to this thing called a 401k or 403b. Guess what also goes away? You're right, that deduction for qualified contributions. So even though the tax rate might not change, what's going to change is the base. And so they'll get perhaps 12% of a larger number rather than 12% of a shorter number. And so let's really talk about what we have. We have three buckets of money. We have our taxable bucket. That's where W-2s, 1099 income, bond interest, CDs, that's where they go. Of course, there's a lot of leaks in that bucket because we've got to pay taxes on that stuff. The next bucket we have is what we call our tax deferred bucket. I often like to talk about what we call the tax postponed bucket. So what that is that's where we put our 401ks, IRAs, and 401(b)(3)s and qualified money. So certainly it has less leaks than the fact that we don't get taxed immediately, but we will get taxed at some point in the future when we take money out. So let's think about that. If we really don't know what the taxes are going to be in the future, and we have an all-time low tax rate today, it could be that when we take our money out in the future, the taxes are higher. So if they're higher, we certainly need to plan for that. If they're lower, so certainly that's a bonus, and so we can go forward from there. But there's a third type of money that many of you have not considered. You're right, it's our tax-free bucket. So some of you, when your children were growing up and you were saving money for college, or maybe you did this for yourself and you used a 529 to help pay for college. The problem with 529s, though, is if you don't use all the money for college and want to use it for something else, guess what it becomes? You're right. It gets thrown in that taxable bucket. We've got other things like Roth IRAs and something called index universal life insurance. So those are examples of some tax-free things. And so what we're going to talk about, firstly, we're going to talk about the Roth IRA. It's a tax-advantaged individual retirement account that has no income tax on withdrawals. So certainly that's a very nice thing to have. What we can also look as that index universal life insurance. It's really more like a Roth-like account with a unique combination of tax-deferred growth, tax-free distribution, and tax-free wealth transfer. So certainly that's an option. So let's think about our population as we're thinking about that kind of stuff. And so we have the top 25% of wage earners, and certainly we've got the bottom 75. And some days these days we hear about the upper 1 or 2%. But let's just plain look at the top 25%. So if I were an online marketer or a radio personality like Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman, and I wanted to sell lots of books, I wanted people to buy my program, wanted people to watch my program, who would you go after? The top 25% or the bottom 25%? Well, I think most of you have guessed that. And so this character you see at the bottom is Susie Orman, and she definitely focuses on the bottom 75%. And so wouldn't you too, if you could sell more books and tapes? And so certainly that's an interesting perspective. But if you're in the top 25%, guess what happens? You pay 86% of all the income taxes in America. Any guesses on how much you have to make to be in that? $83,682. So if we were looking at adjusted gross income data from 2017, the people that pay 86% of the taxes make $83,682. That's why you've never heard of it. The personalities are not talking to you. They're talking to people with cash flow problems. By making this uncommon amount of income, as the government likes to say, you need to seek alternative financial strategies. And this includes considering an IUL policy. So, retirement income framework, we've talked about identify, protect, reduce our taxes. Let's talk about investments. So many of you watch the stock market. Certainly the Dow Jones Industrial Average is reported every day on the news, at least during the weekdays. But here's the interesting thing about stock market returns. The S&P 500 of the last 30 years has produced a rate of 10%. So that's good. Our money doubles every 7 years. So that's good. Unfortunately, the average investor, look at how they did. They only made 4.1%. Why do you think that is? And that's true of the last 10 years and the last year. Why have indexes performed better than investors? That's because many of us, we get emotional about investing. We buy when things are high, and guess when we sell? We sell them when they're low. I always thought we were supposed to buy low and sell high. Yet many of us get nervous, and when we hear the stock market is going way up, we want to join the herd mentality, and we all want to buy in, and we end up buying in at the highest price, and then suddenly the stock market goes down. You're going, oh no, I have to save my money. So we sell. And so we have this continuous cycle driven by emotion. So that's why some people actually hire financial advisors, because they don't have the discipline to look at the stock market in an objective way. So as we go forward, certainly we know there's up markets and we know that there's down markets. The problem is we don't know when we're going to have a bear market, and we don't know when we're going to have an up market. So certainly it seems there have been more up markets than down markets. But then again, it's really a question of when it's going to happen. The question is not if, but how many times will the stock market drop during your retirement? Certainly, we don't want it to drop the first day that we retire, because that can certainly affect the amount of money that we're going to get over time. So we're going to take another short pit stop here. And so here's my name and my phone number, 602-824-2299. And there's my email. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call or email me. So going forward, we've certainly talked about identify, protect, reduce, invest. Well, here's the important thing. Let's talk about managing. We should certainly at least have a meeting once a year to see where you're at. So certainly as life changes, so does your plan. So maybe you want to help pay for your son or daughter's wedding, and maybe you want to start our own business, or pay for our children's college or our grandchildren's college, or some of us may be unlucky enough to be disabled. And so we don't have a choice whether we get to work anymore. And so it's really nice to have a protected income in that circumstance. So let's talk about what we call annual performance reviews. One of the things we do is we provide an income plan summary, and we look at an overall performance review, and we look at the results we illustrated last year versus how things actually performed. And we perform a needs assessment checklist. So what we discussed today, that the current retirement income model is broken. The only way for a successful retirement is through an income plan that protects you from longevity, stock market, income tax, and inflation risks. The retirement income framework, again, is a 5-step roadmap that helps us spend confidently in retirement. So although many of you are probably not traveling on airplanes these days, let's give you a hypothetical here. So let's see, the captain comes over the intercom and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. On behalf of the flight crew, let me welcome you aboard. We should touch down in Dallas at 5 p.m. local time." I say should, because we will be experiencing some turbulence along the way. And good news is, I figured that we have about a 20% probability of actually landing the plane. So most of you are probably panicking. And any of you stay with that captain? I certainly wouldn't. Yet many of you handle your retirement in very much the same way. You have no idea whether your retirement is going to get you to the place you need it to go. So what we do to help people with this is we produce a report. We call it the Retirement Income Shortfall Analysis. So what this does is this measures your percentage chance of living a successful retirement, gives you a yearly breakdown of account withdrawals, and lets you know if you might have some shortfalls. And the other thing we really want to do is make recommendations about how to enhance your score, or really your percentage chance of living a happy and successful retirement. So let's give you a couple examples. So we've got scenario number one. a couple nearing retirement, male age 55 and female age 52. So in this example, their income is 150,000. They want 120,000 per year in retirement, and they have investable assets of 1 million. And they want to continue to contribute to retirement, about 30,000 a year. So one of the things we did is we recommended to this couple that Social Security in the beginning was their only source of protected income. So we recommend they reposition 300,000 of their assets into a deferred fixed annuity so they could have another source of protected income. We also gave them some ideas about how to reduce their taxes. And so many of their assets were taxable and in tax deferred buckets, and none of them were using any tax-free resources. So we recommended they move $30,000 to an annual savings plan, like an IUL policy. And the other thing is, you know, when you have money in the stock market, 100% of the savings is subject to stock market volatility. And so we recommended they get some protected income sources that have been established to cover their essential expenses. So if we were looking again at scenario number one, this couple nearing retirement, so we calculate that they had really a 41% probability of living well in retirement. In fact, if they lived an extra 10 years, that went down to 26%, and only 22% of their money was protected income. And they had some assets remaining at the end, but not as many as they wanted. And so once they made some changes that we recommended, the probability of living a successful retirement was 95%. 82% of their income was protected, and they got to leave a whopping $3 million to the institution or the charity or the beneficiaries of their choice. We have another couple, we call this the retirement red zone. So they are right at the edge of retirement, and they really only had a 32% chance of living a successful retirement. If they lived longer, that was 21%. And we did know that their protected income was 45%. And so unfortunately at the end, they didn't have any assets remaining. And I've seen that time and time again. We recommend a couple of changes here. And with those changes, we moved their protected income up to 75%. They would absolutely have some assets to leave to somebody else later, but those recommendations really helped them out. How many of you know this person? I certainly do. This was in fact my next door neighbor for many years. She was a widow and she was currently retired, and actually one of her sons got really sick. And she spent a good portion of the last 10 years taking care of him at his house, and she really didn't have a great opportunity to save. Many of us know a person like that. It's that nice person that takes us back and forth to the drugstore or a doctor appointment, and the probability, which is sad, of her reliving it or him living a successful retirement was 15%. About 49% of what they had was protected, and they did have some remaining assets. But when we made a couple recommendations, I'm happy to say that we got her to a point that she had a more successful retirement. She had protected income of 88%. Was actually able to leave what I would call a substantial legacy. So all of this we do in something called a retirement income shortfall analysis. So this is a free, no obligation report. I find it incredibly powerful. So even my wife and I once a year would sit down and do this report on ourselves just to see where we are. And so certainly there's no obligation whatsoever. It's completely free. And we consider this merely a second opinion on your retirement plan, no obligation at all. So if you want to, please pick up or really email us if you'd like an appointment. We could certainly talk to you about this. We used to be able to do this in person, so I'd be able to give out forms, but under current scenario, certainly you can give us a call or send us an email or schedule an appointment, and we'd be glad to help you with this custom report. So What we will do is we'll conduct a 60-minute exploratory meeting. These days, we can certainly do it by Zoom or on the phone. Been doing quite a few of those lately, in fact. You'll need to gather your latest account statements. We'll calculate your protected income number. We'll complete the client assessment form, and then we'll review your analysis to give you an idea about where you're at. And so here's something that I find very interesting, and I use this with my clients every day. In fact, I gave out 4 of these this morning, believe it or not. It's a great way to see what your protected income number is, so you know what your essentials are. We'll know what your discretionaries are, so we can help you plan for what you need. So you'll get the bonus of the retirement lifestyle worksheet and the retirement income shortfall analysis. Some of you may ask, what if I already work with an advisor? Great, nothing wrong with that. This is a great way to see if your current advisor has a plan that agrees with what we put together today. Certainly, if they do, you want to certainly stay with that advisor and keep on. But if they don't, this might give you some ideas about some other things that you could do. And that's what's important here. And we'll definitely give you some recommendations because we find that's important. But how you implement them, that's certainly your business. Certainly, we would like to do it. But if your retirement planner is doing a great job, certainly stay there. One of the things that many are worried about is, will I be sold something at the appointment? You know what? Absolutely not. In fact, this plan is more about you than it is about me. So we're going to use your essential expenses and discretionary stuff and help you develop a plan that will be great for you. And in fact, you'll be able to take this retirement income shortfall analysis form home with you. Or we can email it to you, whatever it might be. The other part, some of you worry, oh, wow, he's a financial planner and financial advisor. How much in savings do I need to have? Some people think they need to have a substantial amount. In fact, literally this afternoon, I was talking to somebody from Sun City, and she didn't have a lot of assets, but I'm pleased to report that we could actually help her. We actually helped her in this case get an extra $11,000 per month that she could add on to her teacher's pension or Social Security, so she could live a much better retirement. So in this case, we obviously don't have an appointment form, but you can certainly email me or you can call us, and we'll be glad to get back to you and help you with this. So, but at the end of the day, here's the real importance of a protected retirement income. I would like us all to be like this man on the mountain who's surveying the valley and has total peace of mind. Isn't that a nice thing to have as we get towards retirement? And I want us all to have, you know, this stack of silver coins or money so we don't really have to worry about our finances. So this is my goal for all of you, to have peace of mind, to have the income that you need when it comes to retirement. So let's take back control of our retirement today. Please give us a call, or please email us and we'll be happy to help you. And so one last time, my name is Scott Rulon. My number is 602-824-2299. And my email is scott@rulonfinancial. So that's really all I have for you tonight. I thank you for your time. I know time is, you know, expensive and in short supply these days. For some of you, maybe there's a little bit more because of all the COVID stuff. But I just wanted to let you know I've been working in this market, and so many of you may retire once. I've certainly helped hundreds of people retire over time, very successfully. And so at the end of the day, my satisfaction can come from helping your kids fund their college, from living a peaceful retirement, from being able to buy a house or to downsize. I like to see that in the way that I've helped people, they can end up with some peace of mind. So I'd say at the end of the day, what we really help people with is peace of mind. I thank you so much for attending tonight. If you have any questions, please call me or email me. We'll be happy to get back to you promptly. And you all have a very happy Thanksgiving with all the members of your family or friends that can attend. I'm certainly looking forward to turkey with my wife and my son next week. And I wish you all great Christmas blessings as well if we don't get to talk to you. But please give us a call or email us. Thank you and good night.